Evening, and thanks for joining us on our weekly AJA Zoom event. My name is Robert Gregory, and also on the screen is Dr. David Adler, the president of the AJA, as well as our guest tonight, Sara Medina, all the way from New York, where, as we've heard, it's very early in the morning. The format will be a short presentation from Sara, and then the chance to ask questions. If you'd like to ask a question, the best way, as always, is to raise your hand with the reaction button, and you can also place written questions in the chat, and if we get a chance, we'll get to some of those. Tonight's topic is a very serious and very important issue. Sometimes young Jewish women get into relationships with Arab men. When the women, who can be as young as 15, are taken back to the village, they often become trapped in abusive relationships. These women are frequently disowned by their own families and have nobody in the world. Yad L'Achim never gives up on them and rescues Jewish women and children from villages where even Israel's police don't enter, including from Gaza. Since its inception, it has rescued thousands of women and children from situations of abuse and provided shelter and assistance after their rescue. Sara Medina is head of donor relations, social media, and fundraising. Sara, thanks so much for joining the AJA tonight.
Thank you so much, Robert, and thank you, Dr. Adler, as well, for having me. And thank you, everyone who joined the AJA's amazing live Zoom. I've been seeing that they do these quite often. I think that's really amazing. Just to give a moment of introduction for myself, thank you, Robert, for that. I'm also the American social worker. What that means on my side is I'm the person primarily in charge of disseminating information in English, basically, to anybody who's interested to learn about what it is Yad L'Achim does in Israel, primarily, and how this phenomenon happens, how this continually perpetuates. Sorry, my brain is still early. And I'm in close contact with our social workers in Israel who work hands-on with these women on a regular basis, understanding what it is that is happening hands-on. Just to give a little warning before I begin, I will have, at some point I will share a few stories of women that we've rescued, and it can be a little graphic. Just want to give that warning. I will only be mentioning, of course, without any specific cities, names that are private, and the stories won't be as recent as I have one fresh in my mind, but as that woman was just rescued, let's say it was 2 weeks ago, that would be something, as we keep privacy of the women that we rescued, their children, at perhaps the highest, most priority, of course, as these are real people that are experiencing this in their lives. So let's just give a little bit intro of where Yad L'Achim started, what the organization does, and then how this women trapped in Arab villages, how this came to be, what that means today, and what it means for us who don't live in Israel, or or maybe not Israeli, or don't see this culture hands-on. How do we take this in? Yad L'Achim originally started in 1950, so we are on its 73rd year, Baruch Hashem, and it's been around for a while because it actually didn't originally start with its main purpose we do today. It originally actually started to help refugees when they were coming into Israel. Now, a lot of the refugees, of course, in the 50s, even my grandparents, all former grandparents, were actually refugees in that decade. What was difficult about moving to Israel, other than the difficulties of moving to basically a third world country at that point, was there was no setup for people who wanted to continue to be religiously Jewish, and they were starting to be poached in different areas, to different sections, to different sectors. And the primarily main issue was people were coming and they had no support. There was no infrastructure to help people really set into a new life. So Yad L'Achim started to help people really start to settle in, help people who already settled take these people under their wing, and slowly but surely the issues started to shift to be a little more serious. Not that we don't do refugee work anymore, of course we do. Most recent refugees, of course, that have been helped by Yad L'Achim have been the Ukrainian refugees. Over last I checked, it was over 1,000, 2,000 throughout Israel, with lots of support helping them, settle into Israel, bringing them from the border of Ukraine all the way to Israel. As time moved on and Israel became more an international country, and more people other than just Jews were starting to really move there, 50s, 60s, 70s, there started to rise in the second thing that Yad L'Achim does, which is anti-missionary work. What that means is people who are pouring in money to specifically, target Jews for the sake of converting them, not letting them make their own self decisions. Normally, they go after vulnerable people, specifically refugees, of course, and those who are easily manipulated. Unfortunately, in these really vulnerable times that they were in, and that was how that started. The major part that most people know what Yad L'Achim does then happened a little bit after, around the 70s or so. Yad L'Achim started to help with abuse cases in intermarriage couples, specifically between Jews and Arabs, Palestinians primarily, also Druze, but mostly Palestinians, Syrians, Lebanese. We've helped women as far as I sent money to a woman last year in Yemen that needed support to get passports so she can escape the country. Imagine that. But majority of our work is done in-house, so to speak, in Israel and its surrounding territories, but including a lot of in Egypt. That is the majority of the work. And what's happening is these women, Jewish women, grew up in Israel. They could be Israelis, they could be immigrants, they could be Americans. We have there are stories. Unfortunately, they are much rarer, but also of Western women, Canadians, Americans. I'm just thinking of a few stories off the top of my head. I can't remember an Australian, but they happen that they also enter into these type of relationships. These women, now they enter into a relationship with an Arab, and we must understand that there's a very different cultural, there is a significant cultural difference between even the Israelis, who are very similar to other Middle Eastern countries, food-wise, music-wise, many of the cultural nuances. If you ever meet a Jewish Israeli, it seems very similar to those on the outside. But on the inside, a little bit deeper, there are super big chasms of a difference. And that's where Yad L'Achim steps up. So let's imagine a woman gets into a relationship with an Arab. There's a few laws actually in place in Israel that are taken into account of interfaith relationships, and of course the cultural aspect. So one, two people of the same faith must get married. You cannot be an interfaith couple and get married in the state of Israel. So you either must be Muslim, both must be Christian, both must be Jewish, which are the predominant religions, of course, in Israel. One must convert to the other, and it is very difficult, of course, to convert to Judaism. So that's the first thing. So now when they get into these relationships, they're pushed heavily into this cultural change. Literally, their names, their religions, they're being pushed into a different from their peers, how they grow. The next part is the real cultural difference is their mentality, how some can view women, roles of women, the rights of women in territories, Palestine villages, is not the same. And that is the first fact of the night as well. A woman's rights in Palestine or in an Arab home is not equivalent to the woman's rights in a Jewish home, especially in one as progressive as Israel, being known for its quite heavily left-wing policies towards a progressive stance, especially towards women. So with that now in mind, let's say somebody decides to marry an Arab or to get into a relationship. When does it start? How does this happen? Well, they're culturally maybe different. Do they look like it on the outside? When does this come into play? It can happen very young. As Robert mentioned, it can happen as young as 15. And what we mean by that is the majority of the women that we help are actually ranging from the areas of 14 to 25. Those are 80% of the demographic is literally 14-year-olds, ninth graders, or the first year of high school. I'm not sure exactly what you call it, until when your prefrontal cortex is finishing developing. The most vulnerable ages. There is, of course, unfortunately, another 5%, which is between the ages of 12 and 14. It isn't to be overlooked how 7th, 8th grade age, the prepubescent, is a very dangerous predatory area of one's life. And if somebody doesn't have a strong home, especially, which is the majority of these women that get pulled into these relationships, or into these situations with people who are otherwise, narcissistic, abusive, and are very good at hiding it. We'll get more into their character traits and what these men look like. It can happen very young. Now, of course, there's also a good amount of women above the age of 25, and those are more women that have already been in a relationship for years. And the reason why they're above that age is because by the time they reach out, they're just above the age. They've been in this relationship for 5 years, 10 years, 15 years. They have multiple children, and then they're in that age range. So when we understand that who is being targeted is actually a pretty young demographic, understand the psyche of somebody in that age range, we're going to look now on the culture side. How do I put this? When an Arab gets married to somebody, they have a sheikh will tell them that it is a mitzvah. It is a good deed. They get a lot of, how do I say this in English? They get a lot of schar, they get reward for converting somebody to Islam, especially if they marry that girl, they convert to Islam, then it's as if they're born anew. As if all of their deeds have been erased, all their bad deeds have been erased and they've been born anew, clean again. And when I first learned this, straight from, really, I'm you sometimes hear these things. I learned this directly from a woman that we rescued who came to America to speak, and she was just going over little parts of her life, and it was quite jaw dropping. So when somebody gets into these relationships, okay, they're the regular person that we're looking at. What do they look like? What does this girl look like? They can look like anybody. There's a 30% demographic of religious, 30% traditional, and around 30, or it's pretty even split, not religious. And what that makes everyone should understand is that it really doesn't matter what background you come from, what stereotypes you were taught as a child, because the not religious girl basically doesn't see the difference between an Arab and another type of Middle Eastern Jew. What's the difference between a Palestinian and a Moroccan like myself, or an Algerian or a Bukharian? The very Middle Eastern. We have the music's right, the tea after food is right, everything just and this all just feels, they speak Hebrew like me. And what's the difference? It is a little different when they come from a more traditional religious background, and they were a little more taught that Arabs are different, much more, and they can see the differences because they have a religious component that's very different from them, because culturally a lot of the Israelis, again, versus the not religious Palestinians, they look very similar. Now, once they're in a relationship, this is where the cultural differences that I spoke of truly take hold. Now, what does that mean? The cultural differences is in a relationship, the value of a woman, the rights of a woman, and her position in their society. To illustrate that, I'm going to tell you a story of a woman that we rescued to drive you home this point. This is the first story I want to share. When she got married, because she was basically blackmailed into being married, is he said, either you will marry me or I will tell your family about me and that I'm Arab. Now, did they not know that she came from a traditional to not religious family background? And they didn't know. She managed to hide it. They started that relationship when she was 15. He worked at her school. A lot of those amazing little points. And her family was inattentive. They were divorced. They were her father moved away, didn't take care of her. Many things were in this woman's exact story. And when she came to a point that he was like, no, come on, I've been waiting. I've been taking care of you. I've been paying rent. I've been giving you spending money. I've been buying your affection already. That's another thing about Arab men. They're very they spend money to show affection very easily, and they're very good with their words. And that normally brings in these girls that have maybe a broken family home. They maybe don't have somebody giving them attention in a good way. And this is their only positive reinforcement. And they latch onto that, not realizing how this dichotomy in this relationship is turning into. And when she got posed that question, this is the part that we need to understand about how Jews view Arabs in Israel and the relationship there is, he said, either you marry me or I'll tell your family. What's so wrong if your family knew? When her family learned of her and him, so she said, okay, I'll marry you. But then she went to her family and then she told them she was getting married. So she was left with two options that were basically the same. One, either you leave them and you marry me, or I tell them and they will leave you, as he's promising, and I will leave you. You'll have no one. And that is exactly what happened. When she went to tell them that she was getting married, because she thought, like, at least I won't be alone. They did exactly what he said that they would do, that she knew what they would do, is they abandoned her effectively. Her father tore like, his shirt and said, I don't have a daughter anymore. Her brother said, you're going to regret this. That's all he said. And her mother closed the door in her face. That was all of her family. And that's how they reacted to this news. And she told me, she was like, I just wanted them to stop me. I wanted them to listen to me. I wanted them to hear me. And they just didn't know what to do. And they just stopped. So when she got married, to understand the cultural differences, they lived in a house above his parents in an Arab village, one of those villages in and around Israel. So technically it's part of Israel, but there are these settlements that are Palestinian settlements that, even though it's part of Israel, let's understand something, they are not truly like the rest of Israel. The rest of Israel has a little bit different of an architecture, has different types of road systems, busings. Like, think about, like, if you just walk into a city in Australia, you can see this looks like Australia. A city in America looks like America, right? There's a certain type of building style, certain type of services, etc. This is not that. There are signs in Israel right before you enter villages that are big, very big. They are red and they have black lettering, and they say it in Hebrew and they say it in English. I believe they say it in Arabic. They say, if you pass over into this land, into this village, we are not coming for you. You are on your own, basically. The government's not coming, the police are not coming, you are on your own. And this she experienced. So the cultural differences we're speaking of, she was not given money. She did not have her own money to use. She could not go down to the little grocery store corner market alone. She needed an escort. She did not have a phone. She was not allowed social media, of course. She had no connection to her outside life, her old friends, anything. That her one time, a friend of hers, managed to invite her over to speak, just catch up. But she was just telling her about her boyfriend, just telling her about her life. And when she came over to their house, right? He came back later and told her, invite this friend over. And she's like, why? How do you, she was confused. How do you know she was here? How do you even know she was here? You were not here. I did not tell you. He had cameras somewhere. He knew. And she said, why do you need her? And he took out a gun, rested it against his leg, and said, get her over here. So she was scared. She called over her friend. Her friend came back. She was just there a few hours ago. And he said to her, how dare you speak to my wife about men? How dare you speak to my wife about other men? This is a type of view of women. Of course, she was made to clean. Of course, she was made to cook. Of course, she was belittled in other sexual assaults and emotional assaults and physical assaults. But this wasn't all to different than what he was expecting. He wasn't expecting anything different. You see that in the relationship she had with her mother-in-law who lived downstairs. Is if she wasn't listening perfectly to her mother-in-law or to him, her mother-in-law would say, you should mechanech her. You should teach her. You know, and what that means, that was like a code word for you should beat her. So the idea of going into that story was to little point out for a moment the dichotomy between the place a woman has in a Palestinian relationship. Now, in the ones we're helping these Jewish women out of, they have the continuous, same factor is these are abuse situations. And that's why they need our support. They are in these relationships, can't just leave. This woman did not have a phone. She did not have money. She did not have access to the outside world. She did not have access to go anywhere, let alone out of this situation. How was she supposed to just walk away? She had no walk away capability, so to speak. That's what we need to understand for this moment. And that's not all too weird, unfortunately. Another thing is access to just a policeman. There are no policemen. There is nobody just walking around that will support her. She women will tell you of being in a village that everybody knows who's that Jewish woman who married an Arab. Everybody knows who's the Jews, and they're all the second-class women citizens. They are all treated. She's like, everyone knows who they are, and there's a separate place. Even though many of them converted. To clarify again, for that it is not a difficult task to convert to Islam. It is a sentence said in front of a sheikh. You don't have to mean it. You just have to say it, and then it's binding. And even though we always believe somebody who's born Jewish, they're always Jewish. Even if they do that, there is actually a process of reconversion of a certain sort going before the rabbinate in Israel to change back your official status from Muslim to Jewish. I'm not following the chat. I just want that out there. If anybody's asking any questions, I'm just seeing some things. Okay, great. Even though we believe that once a Jew, always a Jew, there is a certain process that is done and has to be done, and due to the fact that in many ways Islam is a monotheistic religion that believes in the same God, and it is a very messy situation. So just to pull it all together again, these women come from more broken homes than not. These are all abuse cases that we are supporting and helping women out of. They cannot just walk away. Many times they do not have the capabilities, either internally, emotionally, or physically. They do not have those capabilities. And Yad L'Achim helps, one, contact these women. Yad L'Achim helps get them out. And I mean this in a Fauda sense. We have armored guards. We have armored tanks. We have ex-military and special services and all of those things. I'm not sure what the special forces are, but like imagine like a Navy SEALs or like a Black Ops, like those type of individuals, coverts, that volunteer for Yad L'Achim, that go into the Arab villages and literally will do these rescues. And I wish it was as simple as like going over to someone saying, hey, you don't want to be here anymore. Let's help you get a divorce. Let's help you leave. They can't, even if they were ready to emotionally, they just can't walk away. So we have all those capabilities. Now, just to put into perspective, how many women does this happen to? How often? What do we do to prevent this? This is unfortunately happening to hundreds of girls every year that are brand new. We get around 300 new cases or so to 500 cases, depending on the year, unfortunately, of new cases a year, of new cases. Each of our social workers have, on average, around 100 women over their caseload that are in our villages that we know of alone, that they contact on a regular basis around the high holiday seasons, especially when people are missing their families. We just did all over Israel. We just did sessions. Our social workers went around and did sessions with the women who were rescued from, and the high holidays bring up a lot of emotions. And sorry, I lost my train of thought. So it's really everywhere, and that's what we need to understand. Wow, I looked away for a second. My brain just went flips. 1 second, let me just pull myself back.
Okay, it's very early for you, so. Yeah.
No, I'm not done. So that's why it is very early. I just have to remember the last thing I said. It's called ADHD for a reason. Yeah, so we have all of our social workers have around 100 women that they contact throughout the year, and that's just to tell them somebody cares. That's to tell them we remember you, we know who you are, we want to, if you're okay, you're deciding to be in this relationship. I can't do anything about it, in this moment, but if I'm here for you. Many women have been saved this way by the constant connection that these social workers make outside of their caseload, which is quite hefty as well. Just to make sure that they know that they exist. And I believe I spoke to a woman once, and she said her social worker was in contact with her for 7 years before she was finally ready to leave her abusive situation. For 7 years. She constantly said when she was on the phone, she's like, I always told her I was fine. I always told her I was happy. I always told her this is where I wanted to be. True. That's what she said always in the 7 years. But then she told me after, she was like, I was lying. But I wasn't emotionally ready to leave. So first, we're constantly in contact. These are the women that were ready in our system. We're not letting it go. If anyone sees the Yad L'Achim motto is we don't give up on even a single Jew. So once we know that somebody's there, we're going to make sure to keep up with them, and we want them to know that we care. We care just because we care. After they're rescued, they need to be put somewhere. They don't have family many times at this point. Their family, like the girl I mentioned, were abandoned by their families. They either didn't have family, many of these women. If they come from broken homes, sometimes they don't have family to lean on. Most of them do have families, but their families no longer want anything to do with them. So, and of course, these women are coming out of highly abusive relationships with emotional trauma, and maybe no skills. Like this girl who from 18 to 25, she has no marketable skills. She doesn't have any job experience. She wasn't allowed to leave the home. How are they supposed to support themselves? How are they supposed to start new lives? I will answer that question later. I will get to you soon. So Yad L'Achim steps in, and we will help a woman literally start her life anew. Now, of course, there is the social worker. So they're the mental health, and mental health is very important. It sometimes takes months for a woman to come back to a little bit of semblance. Some women, after being a high rescue, they're on suicide watch for months on end. And that is also not unusual. So when I say we help with helping them set up their new lives, we mean it in everything. They don't have clothes, full wardrobe. They don't have an apartment, we pay for it. They don't have anything in the apartment. They don't have a stove there. There's no fridge. There's nothing in it. There's a holiday. They don't have anything. Everything will be provided for. All the furnitures, everything. They need to be in our basically witness protection. We will help them change their social security number, their Taudat Zehut. We will help change their names. They need to go to court to get a divorce from their husbands. Many times it's in Sharia court, which is the Muslim court. Then we have lawyers, and we will help them through this whole process. We have security. We have safe houses. All of this, of course, takes a lot of money. And we have other things that we just do to make sure that these women can really start new lives. They have no family. Before the high holidays, we have a Shabbaton, we have a Shabbat that we put together. I know the most recent one is before Rosh Hashanah season, high holiday season, and that's over like 150 individuals, that do end up coming. These are women, these are children. Where do these children that have, they come from a background that their peers now in Israel that they're being integrated into have no understanding. They do not relate to them necessarily. These are children of trauma. We saw their families being abused. They come from these backgrounds. We create a summer camp specifically for these children every single year. we create these Shabbatones for them to feel camaraderie, for them to connect to each other, to see others that are going through the same things. Of course, Shabbaton can, for that many people to pull off, can be $50,000. The camp could be, everything just goes up and up and up. And that we know. But to save somebody, to save even a single Jew, is worth it. And I'm going to end off on a chazal, on a sage's saying. You just pull it up. Kol matzil nefesh achas b'Yisrael. Every single person who saves even one neshama, one soul from the Jewish nation, ki'ilu, as if kiem olam maleh, as if he created and saved the whole world. We truly believe that every single Jew is worth saving. Everybody is worth going after. Everyone is worth helping. We don't leave even one single Jew behind. And what Yad L'Achim has set out to do since we started, and all of the different missions we do, of course, we spoke about one primarily, is all integral to what we believe, is integral to being Jewish, is caring for each other, being kind, chesed, taking care of each other, and being a unit, being a one Jewish unit. And if anyone's curious, the mitzvah specifically, the Yad L'Achim, the specific good deed that this all accomplishes is something called pidyon shvuyim, which is releasing prisoners. Because like I mentioned, this woman, she had no free will. She had no rights. She had no way out. And in these relationships, that's what these women are brought to. And we make sure that they're able to get that free will again. They're able to make those decisions again. They're able to live life as a human truly again. And that's what we hope to do every single day. Thank you so much, Robert. I think that was a 30-minute mark. I just want to give everyone time for questions. Thank you all for having me. It's not over. I just want to make sure I have enough time. If anyone has any questions, I'd love to answer them. And if we have time, I would finish this point at the end to wrap it all together after the questions. So I started it and I'll end it at the end about the pidyon shvuyim, about the mitzvah.
Okay, well done. You back with us, Robert?
Yeah, that was very incredible. So thank you for that. Truly, what these women and girls go through and what your organization does is amazing. Dave is going to give us an update, and he'll also, I think, tell us about an in-person event we have coming up as well. And then after that, we'll go to some questions. I see we've got a lot of questions in the chat, so if anyone wants to make sure that they get asked, just raise your hand and you can ask it. David, let us know what's happening.
Okay. Thank you, Robert. As we do each week, at the end of the event, if you're not yet actively supporting AJA, please go to the website, which is jewishassociation.org.au. You can become a supporter or make a donation on the website. You can join our email list and also make sure you like and follow the AJA Facebook page for all the news and views update, which is usually 2 or 3 times a day at least. Next week, we also have a bit of a story of transformation. We will be hosting the remarkable Noor Dari. I hope that's how he pronounces his name. It's a story of someone who transitioned from being a jihadist with anti-Semitic, anti-Israel views through to becoming quite an active Muslim Zionist. And as Robert said, we do have a live event coming up next week. We have Lital Shemesh in the country. She's a TV news anchor from Israel. By the way, we have arranged for her to be on Sky News Outsiders program this Sunday morning, and next Wednesday she will be having a sort of a sit-down discussion with Chabad CBD. And if you want to join into that, just have a look on our emails and social media as to how to do that.
I think.
Thank you, David. All right, Jeff, would you like to ask your question?
Shalom. I know this sounds contrarian, and I'm certainly no smart aleck, But could you actually ever have a situation where you had to rescue a man, a Jewish man?
Yeah. It's interesting. There are a few men that we've helped in the past, but this doesn't happen in their culture as much. The Jewish boys is more who we rescue. There have been some times that women that we know are Jewish and they're in these relationships that are just not willing to leave. Either they're just broken, emotionally already too broken, and sometimes they just accept defeat, and that I've seen that happen, unfortunately. But their children have not, and we've rescued their children who were willing to leave those situations. It is a little more difficult with boys. So let's imagine it's a girl of this type of woman. I know a few stories of these women, these girls that we've rescued. They were coming on 18, and their father's getting ready for them to be married off to like a 50-year-old man, basically. At least somebody twice their age, somebody they don't know, and somebody they don't love. And their mother, who's Jewish, is basically just looking on, and she's broken. She doesn't know what to do. She doesn't want this, but she just doesn't know what to do. Sometimes at this point, they get the fire in them to finally like break their emotional cycles and just start it. Honestly, it's not even, they're not breaking it. It's just like just enough courage, really, to try to move away, because these girls do not, and then they don't want to get married to these men. They don't know them. They're being forced into some type of situation. The boys in these examples, right? Growing up as a Palestinian man has benefits. There's not unlike the girls, they are the superior side of this coin, and they have, they're giving tons of freedoms. They can do a lot of whatever they want. I one time, one of the women I spoke to, this will sound so contradictory. The sheik who told him, by the way, marry her, and she converts, you get like, everything will be done. Remember that little snippet? His mother was Jewish. So he was Jewish technically, right? But this man was a sheik telling this full Muslim man to go find this to marry this Jewish girl, convert her to Islam, so that way he gets a free ride into whatever heaven is. I'm forgetting its name. It's very like, these boys don't leave necessarily because there's a lot of benefits for them. And if their father, we had this one woman that her father was literally Al Qaeda, like part of Al Qaeda, like one of like really high up in Al Qaeda. Her sons were like high level terrorists. They had no interest in leaving. They didn't care. This was, what do you mean? Like their mother was basically a dirty Jew at best, or like they had all the benefits. Their sisters, no, but like that, yeah. So not really. Kids though, yes. The younger the boys are, the better. The older they get, if it gets into teenagehood, their identity gets very warped into being and very proud of being Palestinian, mostly, right? They're Arab, and it's you're sending a kid, specifically boys, who are like, you're used to throwing rocks at IDF soldiers and slurs, and now telling them that they're Jewish. Sometimes they don't even know. So you have to understand, they don't know most of the time. So you're giving them more than a culture shock. You're giving them an identity crisis of the highest emotional order. So not always do the boys leave, is the honest answer.
Very complicated cases.
Yes.
Ruven, you're next.
Yeah, I can appreciate the danger of social workers communicating with these girls, but have you had situations where the communication has been compromised and placing the girls' lives in danger?
It is always something of a concern. Unfortunately, that I don't have a story off the hand of when that's happened. I can tell you is nobody of the rescue mission has ever died. They've died injured, like that means being shot at, etc. But we have avoided, thank God, people dying on a rescue mission. So that is the most important thing of what we look at when we say something has been compromised. When we say like it's the utmost, the secrecy, we truly, truly mean it. It could be from a moment to a moment when a rescue will happen. They happen in the middle of the night, more than less. If I go through stories, it just sounds like one work of God to the next. Like one would says like he was supposed to be back and suddenly he decides he wasn't. Like there's opening of a 30-minute that never existed. Like these men are controlling. I was speaking to one woman that her husband tracked her phone at all times, and if she ever left her from, she was allowed to go from her employment to her house to her employment, and he was tracking her at all times. And if she ever veered, there was a call not even a second later. If her phone went off, it was one time she managed to escape this exact woman. She managed to leave, but then she got, so to speak, recaught. He then tied her like by her ankle to her bed for I think it was a week or so, with the only access, the rope was long enough for her to go to the bathroom, until she broke again. He wouldn't let her, like, chained her up like an animal. So it depends on the person, but safety really is the utmost priority. Witness protection is not something I kid about when I say that. And safe houses and etc. Like we have some women who have like our security team like in their cell phones on speed dial. Like they're very good friends with them at this point. It's the saddest thing, but they're amazing men, but like they know them. It's not like they're arbitrary like security person. Like they know who is there, who can come in to their aid. Yeah.
With such outrageous cases, like you're saying, do you get much support from feminist groups, left-wing, women's rights activists, Merit?
I think that's always a mixed bag. It just depends, because keep in mind our focus is very niche, right? Very niche in that sense that when people say, like, remember, we deal with abuse cases, this is the primary, right? So the parts of like, are there not abusive Christians? Are there not abusive Jews? Or what do you mean? Do you think only Arabs? Of course not. There's bad apples in everything. We only help those Jewish women who want out, that are in those relationships. So first, it's not saying that we believe that they're the only bad apples. So that would, like, make us get along with everybody else. And the next part that also would make us, like, mostly get along is the fact that we're just very niche in the sense that we have people who speak Arabic. We understand the culture. We're working a niche demographic for the specific purpose of being very good at helping this specific demographic. Doesn't mean that the other demographics don't need help. It just means that we don't work on jack of all trades. We work in helping specific needs and becoming very good at helping this specific demographic. So with that all being said, at the end of the day, we don't necessarily work a lot with these more left groups, is because we're not going in to maybe rescue a regular Palestinian woman who's also in an abusive relationship. At the end of the day, we are a Jewish donor funded organization putting Jewish lives on the line. And there's many, many, many Jewish women that are in this situation. And it's not like we have the excess of time, unfortunately. It's not like we have the excess of resources. So it's not even in a mean way. It's just that our resources are being dedicated first and foremost in their field towards Jews. It's not like we have a whole team and the capabilities to, even if we wanted to, I'm playing for the good side, devil's advocate. We don't have those capabilities. At the end of the day, there's only a certain amount of employees. There's only a certain amount of women who can, there are social workers especially, that can handle this type of job. It is emotionally draining. It is traumatizing even on the people who work in the organization. And to extend that further and further, I don't have a $40 million budget. I would love to, but I don't. I don't even think 40 million would cover everything we would probably do. Unfortunately, we could always do more. We always wish we could do more.
So since you're on that point, maybe I'll ask you, how can people here, I'm looking at the chat and people are amazed. A lot of people are learning how severe the problem is. They didn't know about it beforehand. How can people support your organization, and what can people do to help?
So I just want to give that as a resource to everybody, that if they want my information, they of course can reach me. So if you ever wanted to continue a conversation or have a conversation, if you call the American Yad L'Achim office, you could always find me. is the point. So what we do to really help, it really depends on what the person wants to do. We have some people that they say that they want to come together, and they come together and they sponsor a rescue. It costs up to like 18,000 USD, and everyone like comes together, or something smaller, something bigger. rescues. We have, women need support. We have social workers. They have salaries. We have Shabbatons. The social worker salary can cost, Israeli shekel, but that could be like 50,000, let's say USD, right? And somebody knows that there's hundreds of individuals that are going to be helped because one person is literally on the task. We have these Shabbatons that we do around twice a year. If we had more funding for it, we would do more. I didn't speak about it, but we do prevention work. We do a lot. That was in good English. We do a lot of prevention work. We do an average of 2 to 3 a week. What you guys don't realize is that most girls and women inside of Israel don't know as well that this is a problem. They don't know as well that there is this danger. And they don't know as well, also, of course, the resources available to them if they ended up in this situation. So we do a lot of work of going around and trying to educate the girls to tell them this is a possibility. Be wary. Okay, you are going to make your own decisions, but you should be wary, know the facts. And if you know anything, say something. I saw a little bit in peripheral. Somebody asked a question, how do we find out about these women? We find out about these women due to the single fact that Jews take care of each other. 4% of women self-call in themselves to tell us that they're in the situation. 4%. Where does the other 96% of our information come from? The other 96% comes literally from people that they know, their aunts, their cousins, their teachers. I have a story of a girl standing at the bus stop, overhearing a conversation.
Cool. Sorry, we just need to unmute.
Sorry, I'm muted. Yeah, it's fine. I have a story of a girl standing at a bus stop, overhearing conversation this girl next to her is having on the phone, recognizing what it is. Now, remember, Israel is a much smaller place than we can imagine. Recognizes her from high school, calls Yad L'Achim and says, I think this girl might be involved. And then we will do so much investigative work and then try to reach out to her and say, hey, by the way, it might be true, might not be true. Just want you to know we're here, what's happening. And that is actually the majority of how we get a hold of new people information. Not to be like, because privacy and everything, but I have a family member as well that was involved with Arabs. We're always quite shocked, and we're so amazed that she's still alive. It's so sad to say that, but sometimes, Black humor helps with pain. One of the social workers I know is her social worker. One of my family members, not my immediate family member, but like I have lots of cousins. I have like all my family. Like I have like 11 great uncles and on both sides. I have a very, very, very big family. But to give you perspective, if somebody lives in Israel, they know somebody. If they try, like by 1 or 2 associations that has been in a situation like this, that and knows about Yad L'Achim. But still, there is a ton more people, and especially, unfortunately, in the not religious world that does not, and the traditional world that sees, of course, Arabs as very similar to another not religious Jew. So they might not see the difference. So they also then don't know about the prevention availabilities. And keep in mind, a 14-year-old girl, even if you tell her, she doesn't really think that this will ever pertain to her. But we're hoping at least, to start the inkling of that little seed of, you might need this information, or somebody in your class might need this information, at least even to help somebody else. Really, nobody left behind. I feel like there was a different question. I'm a tangent person.
No,
did that answer the question?
I believe so, yeah. But what an organization. Wow. How about Joe? Would you like to ask the next question?
Yes, thank you, Sarah, for being doing what you're doing. God bless you and the organization. It's unbelievable. And my question is, how do you fight missionaries, and also how many of these girls do you think there are out there?
Okay, so those are 2 different questions. How do we fight missionaries is a different part of our organization. We have a good amount of people. We have in charge. I don't think I could say his name, but amazing Chabad rabbi actually happens to be. You would never think when you look at him. He has a great beard, but like he puts on other clothes and it just looks like he's like a good hipster. He's in charge of our anti-missionary department. And I was speaking to him when I was in Israel in June, and he was telling me a bit more specifics, because the missionary work is just maybe not my of course I'm a social worker in America, like yeah, I deal with the women, it really moves me a lot. And he was telling me the problem is when you have hundreds of millions of dollars getting poured in, the missionaries outreach to Jews by making false videos in Hebrew, and there's ads targeting children, disseminating information, etc. We will fight them in Parliament. We will remove things. There is some missionary ministries, that's the correct way to say it, online that can be found. And these videos, it's just perplexing for those who know what they're looking at. You see like them singing about Jesus, but in Hebrew, and then they make it all this semi-cultural thing. It's really there for the mind, and it's to understand that they're targeting people who are looking for something, but are vulnerable. To understand that these are the same people who are also easily targetable by cults. So we help with anti-missionary work and anti-cult work. So Jews who are found to be entrapped in a cult, and if we find out about them, remember we work primarily in Israel, we will help rescue them from said cult. So it's the same person that's being targeted more or less, but it's just slightly different venues. There's a lot of money being poured into it. It's very hard to fight.
Very vulnerable. Very vulnerable people, mostly, you're saying. And the other part of the question, yeah, we've had a few people ask the written question. How many women remain trapped like this, would you estimate, that haven't been rescued?
So I said that there was around 100 women on each of my social workers in Israel have around 100 women on their roster, actively. That's around 2,000. Keep in mind that Israel is a very small country. Those are active. Some people stop asking you to call them. Some people fall off in and out. And then there's the new people every year, which takes a little bit of time to get a hold of and to come to my same type of level. So that's between 2,000 to 3,000 on a very active that are willing to engage with you. Yeah, and it can be more. We have to understand that why we do prevention is because that's one too many, let alone 3,000 too many. You're looking at a nation, in Israel of maybe, I always say that Israel has a population of 9 million people. As somebody who has Israeli parents, I feel like they always add everybody not born in Israel, but their parents are Israeli. So now you're a citizen to that number, because it's good for aid. That's my personal opinion. And I agree, it's great. There's actually not a whole lot of people who live in Israel who are Jewish who fall into this category. A few million people, 7, 8, it's even if it was a whole 9. You could have some, depending on where they're from. I've seen girls like from the most religious schools in Bnei Brak, one of the most religious cities in Israel, get involved with an Arab to any, it could happen to anyone. And I one time heard, this was the most crazy thing I've ever heard. A woman that we have spoke before 500 Beis Yaakov ultra Orthodox girls in either Bnei Brak or Jerusalem, and told their story, told how she nearly got killed, stabbed 12 times, the whole thing, pull it full out there, tell these girls what the dangers are. After the whole thing was over, they turned on the lights. She was like, there's 500 people here. I did not know how many people are here. And she went over to her social worker that's there with her. Whenever they give a talk, we send, the girl who's going to tell her story, and a social worker will be there as well. And she told her something. She was like, why would these girls need to hear this? Of course they know not to. Like, why? These girls know better. And she was like, give it a moment. 4 girls called in to Yad L'Achim after this speech. And keeping in mind the percentages that only 4% of girls self-report that they're in these relationships. These girls all called saying, I'm in a relationship. I'm worried that this might turn into this. Nothing was that bad yet, but they're like, what should I do? How do I end this? How does he not become violent, et cetera, et cetera. But now we just pretend to take the exact same percentages and ratios, and to understand that it's hard for me even to estimate fully, because I believe that the numbers are much higher than people are fully giving them credit for. And it's very difficult to get accurate numbers because, when somebody comes from a Jewish background, especially in Israel, where it's a big taboo of, you marry Jewish, and, we believe that, to have any type of relationships with somebody who's not a Jew, especially an Arab, with all of these stereotypes and dangers or whatever, they will keep this hidden until it's many times too late. Or then they're a serious Yad L'Achim case. But we work a lot, hence why prevention is, people also like to sponsor preventions, the talks, the events, the information, as dissemination of information, like depends, I think that answered that, but I'm just going to give another time for more questions. Sorry.
I think, besides for AJA, I'm not sure that any other Jewish organization would even be in Australia would be willing to discuss these important issues. So it's sort of a bit taboo even here. But Philip, would you like to, you might just have time for your question, and then.
Thank you. Sara, also, God bless you with much success. Thank you very much. I'd like to know what the attitude of the Israeli government is to your organization. Do you get any help, any financial help, any military help, any other help?
Amazing question. Each of those different points have a different version of an answer. Military help-ish. Political help-ish. What was the other part? Money? No. Now let's go. let's move on to the political and the military. We work with the military to make sure that, before we do an op, there's a certain amount of interaction to make sure everything is safe. I don't know what to say. Like, West Bank, Palestinians, Arabs, it's a lot of questions, right? Sorry, somebody just mentioned something. But politically, due to the fact Israel is such a mixed country, you can't just say like, hey, I'm going to support a organization that wants to go and rescue Jews from Arabs. Like, what's wrong if a Jew wants to marry an Arab? Who are you to get involved? And many of these type of ideas are very easily coming out. I always say to people, and like Robert said, like, maybe there are other organizations in Australia that wouldn't give the platform to speak about, which I feel is a little bit of a shame, because I hope that I could present it as is at the end of the day, sometimes, there's the idea that, it's, you're Jewish, they're Arab, and there's this dichotomy difference that you're believing against. But there is a majority to understand is that this is a woman in pain. And this is something, and because of their dichotomy, they just can't walk away from, that should be valued as the priority above all else. And that doesn't matter. Like, if this is my specialty, who cares if this is my specialty? Everyone should have a specialty. And if this wasn't a problem, I wouldn't have a specialty. So it shouldn't matter if I'm speaking to somebody who's left or somebody who's right. But still, at the end of the day, politically in Israel, it is a very, very situation. We one time had a police officer tell a woman that we rescued that I cannot help you, but I'm going to call somebody who can. And she called Yad L'Achim. We were there within 30 minutes. And we got her out of the situation. But the police literally, they can go arrest him, but she had nowhere to go. She had nothing. She had no resources. She was that woman was on suicide watch. Yeah, what is she gonna do? Like, when they say I can't help you, maybe I can go arrest the man. But let's be real. When somebody understands truly what the issues of domestic violence and cycles of abuse are, once you're out of it, it's not the end. It is truly the beginning. And us as an organization, we believe in fully pulling somebody through, not just halfway. Unfortunately, like some domestic violence and like support organizations sometimes tend to, is they have a limit to how much support. They might give you 6 weeks, they might give you whatever. They only give us a little bit amount, just enough to you feel like a little above the poverty. Like, I can buy something, but I can't do anything. No, we truly believe in helping them start life completely with all the resources necessary. And that is a tenet. And Baruch Hashem, thank God, this police officer knew that and was able to access us, but otherwise not really.
Amazing work. Amazing.
phenomenal organization. Lana's said in the chat that maybe a movie should be made about the work you guys do, and wouldn't be surprised.
We're actually hoping there is a book. It's a little, I think it's in English. We are hoping to actually create a more in-depth, like somebody speaking in English, hopefully in the next few months. It's just very difficult when these women don't want their faces publicized. People say like, oh, what are these women that we rescue? What do they look like? And I'm like, I can't show you unless I came down to Australia. You sat in front of me and I was able to show you pictures because I have them. But at some point it's hard to, I can't publicize their faces. These are private people. Remember, at the end of the day, we've had people that we've even blurred their whole entire body. And somebody says, oh my gosh, their body shape looks like you. And then it gets to the girl and the girl gets to us and but you cannot tell this person is the same person. Their face is completely, but this one person, their family member, their sibling, it's more likely their sibling, by the way, that recognizes, because they were at the event, they recognized the rest of the place. They remember what they looked like. It's like all that is very difficult to properly portray what we do when a lot of the main things of what we do is so private. I can't show you what these kids look like unless I literally showed you. I can't show you these women unless I show you. I cannot tell you every single story that is heartbreaking, because sometimes they're somebody's private life, and people are constantly worried about being found again by their ex-Arab husband if they're in danger, or they just want to move on. They many times they just want to move on. They want their life to start anew. It's hard for us as an organization. It's very hard to fundraise with that. So I speak, but it's true. It's very difficult for these women, and it makes sense.
Amazing organization, amazing work you're doing. I would encourage everyone to support you. We've shared the link to your website in the chat. If there's any other social media or anything that people can follow, let us know. But thank you so much, Sara, for your very informative presentation. And thank you everyone for joining us. And yeah, please go to the website, support this very important organization. And we look forward to seeing everyone again next week, and for people in Sydney that are joining us at the in-person event as well. For anyone else, for now, you can stay on 3ZZZ. You've got Morris Klein you can listen to. You can also keep up to date with what AJA is doing on our social media or on our email list. Otherwise, thank you again, Sara, and thanks everyone for joining us. Have a good night.
Thank you for having me. And if anybody emails Yad L'Achim, it's in our contact information. If you just write from this event, I will personally answer your email, and I could answer any questions if they came up. Thank you all for having me. I really appreciated this. Very interactive. I very much loved it.
Well done. Bye-bye.